Hi, this is Casey Stangle, and I am doing my report on the Temple Beth-El, the synagogue in San Antonio, Texas. Um, I grew up as a Christian, so I wanted to do my report on a Jewish synagogue to see how it is related to Christianity and the religion that I grew up with. It was about an hour from my house. I made the drive downtown. It's on the corner of Belknap and West Ashby, by the Alamo Colleges downtown. Um, Originally, I researched. I wanted to find like one of the oldest Jewish temples in the area, and I found Temple Beth-El. It's not only the oldest in San Antonio, but also in South Texas. It was founded when Jewish people immigrated to America through the Galveston point of entry, and when they made their way to San Antonio, they set up the temple and the congregation. They still worship in the Wolf Sanctuary, which was finished in 1927, and is the big dome that you see upon approaching the building from the outside. Besides that, the building is very like modern looking. It has lots of stucco on the exterior, and a little portage you can pull in with your car. So I mean, it doesn't look like it was built in 1927. Most of it is remodeled, but it still has the feel of a place of worship because once you walk in, it was a very familiar feeling to me because there's like wood paneling on the walls and by the doors. It just reminds me very much of a church, any church foyer when you visit as a child. Reminds me of the 20th century wood paneling and pews and everything. But it is a a Reformed Jewish synagogue, so they did not, um, they weren't traditional Jewish. They didn't practice traditional Judaism, and because of that, they had very modern type of art, like on the walls when you walk in. There was a Jewish mural right when you walk in that had like the Ten Commandments and some other symbols of Judaism. And that brings me to the when you walk into the main foyer, the the what's it called, the Wolf Sanctuary, the main place of worship. You're greeted by the high vaulted domed ceiling, and it's just white walls everywhere with gold accents. It was very different from like a church or any other place of worship I'd been to. They did have like the stained glass on the sides, so that was very reminiscent of just a church, like a Baptist one that I had been to. The difference was the backdrop. They have a granite like a backdrop. It's all white granite with like the Ten Commandments, a big archway. So it was very much more flamboyant than I'd thought, but seemed very traditional because it's all white granite, and that is also where they keep all the Torahs and stuff. It kind of looks like a fireplace, and that's where they keep like all the scrolls and everything. But the Torah actually is what one thing that stood out to me because they still have it on scrolls. They did not convert it to a book. The texts are still on scrolls, which seemed very traditional and just stood out to me in that way. Besides that, though, the Temple of Beth-El practices Reformed Judaism, and so they are more in turn with they're more open to the societal norms of today. Doing some research on Reformed Judaism, they don't believe in the Jewish people as just like an ethnic group. They're very open to people that might be interested in converting and other ethnicities out of Jewish heritage. Because I had read that traditional Judaism is not very welcoming to people that choose to convert. It just the way that they believe that they're the chosen people, but the Reformed Judaism is much more open to that, and also much more open to women and their inclusion in the religion. Um, I know in traditional Judaism, the women and men are to be separated while at temple, but this was not the case at Beth-El. The women and men were seated everywhere, and they were not separated. And it just shows that everyone was treated much more equally there. And on top of that, the two rabbis that were up there, as well as the other worship leaders, all three of them were women, and everybody seemed to be okay. It just seemed much more inclusive, and there are also a lot of being in San Antonio. There are a lot of people of Spanish descent there. It didn't seem like it was just how would you say, like racially Jewish people there. It seemed much more inclusive. When I walked in, I sat in like one of the very back rows up underneath. There was a balcony up top, but I just didn't want to interrupt anybody, since I definitely seemed like an outsider, regardless of how open they were. At the beginning, when I walked in, the two leaders were actually singing hymns. It wasn't like it wasn't led by like a group of singers. It was just the two of the ladies that were singing in what I believe is Yiddish, or the traditional Jewish language. It was a lot like a Christian, what's it called? A service that I had been to, where it starts off with singing when you walk in, and then everybody stands and sings together. So it seemed very traditional in that way, and traditional in the fact that they were still speaking in a complete other language. But after that, they obviously were speaking in English when reading from scripture and stuff. Another thing that stood out to me is before or after the hymns, but before the service, they had a 13-year-old male who was in the process of, or they called him the bar mitzvah. It seemed like he was partaking in the bar mitzvah, where he wants to take part in Judaism, and seeks to become part of the religion. He got up there and he had to sing some scripture in Yiddish, and read out scripture that was commemorating the Shabbat and how they welcome it from God. After that, I mean, there was a lot of singing, all in Yiddish. So throughout the whole time, I really had no idea what was going on, because it's in a different language. And that lasted for like 45 minutes, almost half of the hour and a half that I was there for that night. And then after that, the women, or one of the rabbis, her name was Rabbi Mara Nathan. She got up there and, surprisingly enough, spoke on the subject of the Messiah, and just kept relating it back to Judaism and Reform Judaism and Christianity even, which was seems like they knew I would be visiting as an outsider, because she was very clear and concise on like just showing how their views differ not only from Christianity but from that of a classic Judaism. For example, she's began to spoke about the Messiah, and how it would one day return to rebuild Jerusalem, and spoke how like classic Judaism, they believe the Messiah will come and save them. But she goes on to say that is very Christian-like in belief, and instead of the Messiah, they in Reform Judaism believe in what is it called, the Messianic age, which focuses less on the Messiah as a person. Like Christianity, they believed that Jesus would come and save them. They believe that Jesus was simply another prophet, which I mean is what all of Judaism believes. But Rabbi Nathan went on to describe how it's different from classic Judaism, and how Reform Judaism believes that this Masonic age is that people should come together to bring about the end times, and they said that waiting on the Messiah is like too passive, and that Reformed Jews should be more proactive in bringing upon the age, like by being nice to people, and just more inclusive. but she just spoke on how that differed from Christianity, where they're kind of just waiting on one person. But overall, it was made very apparent that this was a Reformed Jewish synagogue. While it looked very traditional, um, it a lot of their beliefs and just guidelines. Like, she also spoke of gay people being allowed in there, and how that even differed because traditional Judaism doesn't even really allow women to speak in front of the congregation, and how that they were much more inclusive. It was just made very apparent to me when I was there that they were not traditional Judaism or Christianity. Um, and it just, I mean, it really helped me, I guess, view things differently, because I always thought of Judaism as this very strict, almost like how Catholicism is in Christianity, how it's very strict. There's very strict rules. They believe more in like the Old Testament rules. Just like, I mean, when you think of Judaism, you think of the Ten Commandments and like all of that. And it was just made very aware to me that it's more than that. That just because it's just Judaism doesn't mean it has to be Judaism doesn't mean it has to be so strict and rigid like that. And she multiple times quoted from a book that was called Liberal Judaism, and just how it fits with the political scene of today. While it wasn't the scripture that she was quoting at that point, it just proved that their beliefs are much more open than I originally thought. So it definitely changed my views on the religion as a whole. And I was not really aware before visiting or doing the research that there were that there were two different types of Judaism. So overall, I really did enjoy the experience. I left before being able to talk to anybody, but it was a very it was very kind of, I want to say, familiar, because a lot of the elements reminded me of Christianity. There's the Ten Commandments, the stained glass windows, and all of that. But it was also very different from Christianity, as in their beliefs. And she just talked a lot more about how they relate to the rest of the world, and how they seek to be different from traditional Judaism. So overall, I'd say that my stance on the religion has changed since visiting there. And yeah, that is my report on the Temple Beth-El in downtown San Antonio. Thank you.